Bar the windows. Try to hide. They're coming.
At the northernmost edge of Alaska, a small town is about to enter 30 days of total darkness. For the residents, it means a long, freezing nightmare. But for bloodthirsty creatures, it's the perfect hunting ground. Officer Eben stands there, watching the final sunset before the polar night begins. And deep down, he feels nothing but fear and unease. Because earlier that day, something strange happened. Every single resident's satellite phone had been stolen and duplicated. Stealing them for money would make sense. But destroying them afterward, that's pure sabotage. Eben and his partner can't figure it out. Is someone deliberately trying to cut this town off from the outside world? As the sun finally disappears beyond the horizon, the town officially enters its yearly polar night, which means for the next 30 days, no one will see the sun again. People now have two choices: leave by plane or stay behind and endure the endless cold and darkness. Eben's wife, Stella, had already decided to leave. Their relationship had long since fallen apart. But on her way to the airport, a sudden car accident changed everything. She missed the last flight out.
My mom could come down and give you a tow, but she don't move too fast.
With no other option, Stella calls Eben for help. But right now, Eben has no time to deal with anything else. He's just received a report. All the sled dogs in town have been slaughtered overnight. For no clear reason, it leaves him deeply unsettled. And then another call comes in. Someone has sabotaged the town's only helicopter. With no other choice, Eben sends his deputy, Billy, to pick up his wife. While he heads straight to the scene, the person who reported it is a worker from the refinery. When he came in for his shift, he found a massive amount of wreckage inside the crusher. All of it parts from an aircraft. He couldn't understand it. Who would do something so destructive with nothing to gain? Standing there, Eben falls into deep thought. First, the communication tools were destroyed. Now, the most important means of transportation, sled dogs and the helicopter, are gone too. And once the snow keeps falling for a few more days, no one will be able to leave. The entire town will become a completely isolated island. Eben starts to feel it. A massive conspiracy is slowly closing in around them. After leaving the refinery, Eben heads to the town's only diner. As he approaches the bar, he notices a suspicious man. At this time of year, almost no outsiders would stay in town. And yet this stranger keeps demanding one thing over and over: a meat burger. Out of pure instinct, Eben decides to bring the man back to the station for questioning. But the stranger reacts with extreme arrogance. Suddenly, a gun is pressed against the back of his head. It's Stella, Eben's wife. She's arrived just in time. As a ranger in the town, she's basically half law enforcement herself. The two of them put the outsider in the car and take him back to the station together. Eben is curious. How did this man even get to such a remote town? But the stranger just smiles and says nothing. Inside his mind, a memory flashes back. The moment his companions abandoned him on the coast. He had walked for hours before finally reaching this town. Now, lying lazily on a bench, he tilts his head and stares straight at Eben with an intense gaze. Then he gives a chilling warning. Board up your doors and windows and hide. Because they're coming. Eben frowns and asks, "Who are they?" But before the stranger can answer, the entire town suddenly loses power. Every street is swallowed by darkness. The man slowly sits upright, a twisted smile spreading across his face. At that moment, a sense of dread creeps into Eben's heart. He tells Stella to stay at the station with his grandmother and his younger brother, Jake, while he drives out alone to the power station. From a distance, he sees it. The warehouse door is wide open, and on the ground, there are fresh bloodstains. Following the trail, Eben looks ahead and sees the station manager's head impaled on a wooden stake. In that instant, he realizes something is terribly wrong. He immediately uses the radio to warn the entire town.
Lock your doors and load your firearms.
But the warning comes a little too late. A woman sitting at home suddenly sees something crash through her window. Before she can even understand what's happening, she's dragged away. Hearing the noise, her husband rushes outside, and that's when he finally sees it. The thing that took his wife is a humanoid monster, but its strength is overwhelming. No matter how hard he tries, he simply can't hold on to her. All across the town, screams begin to erupt, tearing through the dead silence of the polar night. Blurry figures, moving at terrifying speed, dart through the streets like ghosts. They look human, but their skin is deathly pale, their fangs razor sharp, and their eyes pitch black. In a savage, almost primal way, they begin slaughtering the unarmed residents. Blood stains the pure white snow. And in an instant, this once peaceful town turns into a living hell. Meanwhile, Eben and Stella have no idea what's happening. They're on their way to meet a colleague who lives outside of town. But Stella quickly senses something is wrong ahead. The two step out of the car to check. And the moment they see it, Stella immediately turns and runs. But the creature is insanely fast. In the blink of an eye, it leaps onto the roof of their car. Eben fires several shots, but misses every time. At the critical moment, Stella slams on the brakes and finally throws the creature off. Shaken to their core, the two rush back toward town, only to realize the monsters have already launched a full-scale attack. Suddenly, a desperate call for help comes through the radio. It's Eben's grandmother. The two rush back to the station as fast as they can, only to find the place covered in blood. His grandmother and Jake are both gone. Inside the cell, the stranger looks completely defeated. He tells Eben that he was abandoned. Those creatures never planned to let him join them in the first place. He begs Eben to kill him, but Eben doesn't have time to deal with this madman. At that moment, the creatures in the darkness finally reveal their true form. They're a pack of brutally savage vampires. With a single command from their leader, they launch another wave of slaughter across the town, a place that stays in darkness for 30 straight days. For vampires, this is the perfect hunting ground. Eben quickly takes Stella and escapes into the nearest restaurant. To his surprise, several survivors are already hiding inside. And somehow, his younger brother Jake is still alive. But their grandmother wasn't so lucky. She's already been killed. Even so, there's no time to grieve. If they stay in the restaurant, it's only a matter of time before they're found. Eben decides to move everyone to a safer hiding place. Stella suggests going to Charlie's attic. The entrance is well hidden, making it hard to detect. Eben nods in agreement. Then he warns everyone. He'll drive out and draw the monster's attention, and the rest of them must move out as fast as possible. As the engine roars to life, a heart-pounding fight for survival begins. But before they can even get far, the car suddenly jerks to a stop. The vampires have grabbed onto the rear with their bare hands. Under the leader's command, they actually flip the several-ton police car over. In that moment, Eben's heart sinks to the bottom. They're completely surrounded. Then suddenly, a thunderous roar echoes from ahead. A bulldozer comes charging in at full speed. It's the snowplow driver, here to help. Eben and Stella quickly jump on, and just like that, they barely manage to escape the vampire's encirclement. By the time the three of them reach Charlie's attic, the other survivors are already there. The ladder leading up is hidden. For now, the vampires shouldn't be able to find them. Everyone squeezes into the cramped attic space. Outside, the sounds of vampire screeches and the screams of other victims echo through the night. For them, every second feels like torture. Eben quietly reassures the group. They know this place and they understand the cold. As long as they take turns sleeping and ration their food carefully, surviving the 30 days of polar night might just be possible. Meanwhile, back at the police station, the vampire leader finds the stranger. It turns out, the stolen phones, the dead sled dogs, and the destroyed helicopter, all of it was his doing. His goal was to cut off every escape route and help the vampires carry out their attack on the town. As a reward, the leader promised to turn him into an immortal vampire. But reality is far more brutal. Instead, he's sent straight to hell. Suddenly, a woman's cries for help echo from the streets outside. The survivors hiding in the attic peek through the cracks. A young girl is out there in the snow, crying helplessly.
Somebody!
Everyone feels a surge of sympathy. They want to go out and save her. But Eben quickly notices something is off. On the rooftops behind the girl, countless dark figures are lurking. It's a trap. When the girl's cries fail to lure anyone out, the vampires move in once again, surrounding her completely. Terrified, the girl begs for mercy. But the vampires don't care. They bare their cold, razor-sharp fangs. And what follows is a blood-soaked nightmare. That horrifying scene completely shatters the survivors' last bit of psychological defense. Some of the survivors start suggesting they need to escape the town as soon as possible. After all, their food won't last much longer. Eben nods in agreement, but without transportation, Rushing out now would be suicide. This isn't something they can decide on impulse. Then one of the older men finally breaks down. He can't take it anymore. All he can think about is his wife, who's still home alone. No matter what, he insists on going to find her. His son and Stella try desperately to talk him out of it, and eventually the old man gives in. But the moment he turns to go to the bathroom, he suddenly slips out through the window. His son notices and immediately chases after him. Dad! And just like that, there are no surprises. Both father and son are brutally killed by the vampires. Their agonizing screams echo back into the attic. The survivors sit there in silence, their faces filled with despair. Then suddenly, a low rumble rolls across the rooftop. A violent snowstorm arrives out of nowhere, and for the first time, they get a brief moment to breathe. Using the storm as cover, Eben decides to move everyone to a general store with more supplies. They carefully make their way through the blizzard. Along the way, they don't encounter a single vampire. It seems even these creatures fear the extreme cold. After successfully reaching the store, everyone spreads out to gather supplies. But the snowplow driver stumbles upon something horrifying. A vampire girl, crouched on the ground, feeding. The moment she senses someone nearby, she lunges forward at terrifying speed. Luckily, her strength has its limits, and with everyone working together, they manage to take her down. But by the time they come back to their senses, the blizzard outside has already stopped. Once again, they're completely exposed to danger. Staying in the store is not a long-term solution. Eben suggests heading to the oil refinery. It's more secure, and it has its own independent generator. But the problem is, there's no cover between the store and the refinery. Someone has to lure the vampires away. And once again, that dangerous job falls on Eben. Stella can't bear to see her husband risk his life. She reminds him, at his grandmother's house, they had installed several high-powered UV lamps to grow special plants. If the vampires chose to attack during the polar night, then they must be extremely sensitive to light. Eben immediately understands. He nods. Before leaving, they agree to regroup at the police station and then head to the refinery together. A loud shout suddenly tears through the silence. The noise Eben makes successfully draws all the vampires toward him. Meanwhile, the others seize the chance. They rush out of the store and make a run for the station. At this point, Eben has already reached his grandmother's house. He quickly starts the generator and restores the power. Then, holding a UV lamp, he positions himself at the doorway. The vampire leader stays cautious. He first sends one of his underlings to test the situation. The moment the door is pushed open, the vampire is blasted by the intense light and forced to retreat. Finally, Eben confirms their weakness. For the first time, he feels a bit of relief. He even takes a moment to share the good news with his wife. But the vampire leader is far more cunning than expected. He cuts off the power entirely. Just like that, Eben is once again trapped in the middle of a vampire encirclement. Over the radio, the snowplow driver beside Stella grabs the mic. He tells Eben to run toward the highway as fast as he can. Eben freezes for a moment, not fully understanding why, until he sees it. The driver comes charging in with the bulldozer. Even against these vampires, there's nothing they can do against a steel beast like that. But once the bulldozer crashes into a wall and loses power, the driver suddenly pulls out a bundle of explosives from his coat. It turns out, he never planned on making it back alive. A blazing explosion erupts into the sky. Through tear-filled eyes, Eben watches the man who saved him twice, blown into pieces, forcing himself to hold back the grief. Eben turns and runs back to the station to reunite with the others. But in the days that follow, there are no more snowstorms. The group has no choice but to stay put and wait in silence. In the blink of an eye, 27 days pass. Only 3 days remain until the sun rises again. Looking out the window, Eben suddenly notices a flash of light across the street. He immediately responds with his flashlight. From the other side, the exact same signal comes back. Eben realizes that's most likely Billy. Without hesitation, he and Stella rush out toward the signal. They push the door open, and sure enough, Billy is inside, sitting on the floor in a daze. His leg is injured, and his wife and child have both been killed by the vampires. Billy had planned to end his own life, but his last bullet jammed. After hearing this, Eben feels a deep ache in his chest. He promises, no matter what happens, he won't abandon his people. The two of them help Billy up and make their way outside. Right then, The long-awaited snowstorm finally arrives. They struggle through the storm and make it back to the station, only to find it completely empty. It's clear the others have already headed to the refinery. With no time to waste, the three of them hurry after them. But not long after, the storm suddenly stops again. With no cover left, they're forced to hide under a car and wait. Through the blowing snow, they spot a little girl on the street. Even though they know this could be a vampire trap, Stella can't help herself. She runs out and brings the girl back. But that single decision completely exposes their position. Eben has no choice but to step out and draw the vampire's attention, while Billy escapes in the opposite direction. After successfully shaking off the pursuit, Eben reaches the refinery first. There, he finds his younger brother, Jake, but there's no sign of Stella or the little girl. Not long after, Billy also arrives at the refinery, but he doesn't realize a vampire has followed him right to the door. When the others hear the noise and rush over, Billy has already been bitten. Eben leads the charge to help him, but there's still no match for the vampire. At the critical moment, Billy suddenly lunges forward. With everything he has left, he shoves the vampire into the grinder. He manages to kill it, but loses an arm in the process. And it gets even worse. After being bitten, Billy is already starting to turn. Eben has no choice. Holding back the pain, he personally puts down his closest friend. Just as this crisis is resolved, Eben receives a message from his wife. It turns out she and the little girl have been hiding under a car this whole time. And all around them, vampires are watching, waiting. The only good news is there are just a few hours left until sunrise. As long as they stay perfectly still, they might survive. But the vampires aren't going to just wait for the sun. They come up with a final plan to block the oil pipelines at the refinery. Once that's done, a single spark could burn the entire town to the ground, along with any survivors left behind. That way, they can erase all traces, disappear once again, and wait in the shadows for the next polar night to come. Watching the raging fire spread out of control, Eben quickly realizes what the vampires are planning. To keep his wife from being burned alive, he makes a desperate, almost insane decision. Right now, there's no way humans could defeat these monsters with sheer strength alone. So Eben draws a syringe of blood from the infected Billy and injects it into his own body. He had already noticed before that right after the transformation, humans can still retain their consciousness for a short time. A wave of intense pain floods through his entire body. But at the same time, he feels an overwhelming surge of power. The vampire leader freezes, staring at this vampire he didn't personally create. For no reason at all, a burning rage rises inside him. He decides to kill this defiant creation himself. But what he doesn't expect is just how terrifying Eben has become. Driven by the will to protect his family at all costs, Eben throws a single punch and blasts straight through the leader's head. With their leader dead, the remaining vampires scatter in panic. The crisis is finally over. Stella runs straight to Eben, tears streaming uncontrollably down her face. The two sit together quietly on the edge of a cliff, watching from afar as a beam of sunlight finally breaks through the darkness. After 30 long days, without warning, Eben lets out a painful scream, and all Stella can do is hold him tightly in her arms as she watches him slowly turn to ash. And that is the full story of 30 Days of Night. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to stay tuned for more. See you in the next one.